Hello and welcome to another episode of An Imperfect Leader, Leadership in After Action, a series where leaders look back at decisions they've made and consider a series of questions. I'm Peter Stiepelman, I'm your host, and I'm an imperfect leader. I spent more than 20 years teaching and leading, first in the Oakland Public Schools in Oakland, California, and then in the Midwest, Missouri to be exact, where I was a teacher and a principal, an assistant superintendent, and then the superintendent of the fourth largest district in the state. I'm constantly striving to learn from my experiences and from the experiences of other leaders. The aim of this podcast is to lift the learning and lift the imperfect leaders up. That way, when you hear the term imperfect, you'll see strength. Strength from the candor needed to recognize imperfection as a real advantage. Let's get started. Have you ever heard of a fail fest? I hadn't. I've heard of Festivus from Seinfeld, Festivus for the rest of us. And in my school district, there was an annual airing of grievances by some of the coordinators with a poll and everything. Sadly, I never got invited, but maybe that was for the best. Dr. Alena Zachery-Ross describes it in our conversation. At the end of each year, she brings her leaders together, and each leader, including her, especially her, walk through decisions and events that just didn't go as planned. A fail fest. I love it. Now, I'm not saying that everyone listening should go and institute a fail fest. You need to first cultivate and curate a cultural field that supports an environment where people feel safe detailing their mistakes. A culture of vulnerability and resiliency. In fact, in this episode, resiliency is a word that Alena embraces. In a district where a large percentage of her students participate in the federal free lunch program, her children must be resilient. Poverty makes learning really hard. Poverty on the brain increases cortisol, and high levels of cortisol will affect the hippocampus, which controls memory. It'll damage the amygdala, which delays social-emotional processing. And so I asked Alena what resiliency looked like in her district of Ypsilanti, Michigan. Thanks for tuning in. Today on An Imperfect Leader, Dr. Alena Zachery-Ross is my guest. Dr. Zachery-Ross is a self-described native Detroiter and has dedicated her career to educating others. She has served in positions including classroom teacher and a school psychologist and a teacher consultant, a principal, assistant principal, a pastor, a motivational speaker as well. She has been the superintendent of the Muskegon Heights Public School Academy System, the Okemos Public Schools, and currently leads Ypsilanti Community Schools. Alena, welcome to An Imperfect Leader.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm just really excited to be here.
It is so good to see you. I think it's been, 5 years since we've seen each other, and it kind of feels like yesterday that we were at AASA and learning from each other and laughing with each other. And you know that adage, I think it's from Maya Angelou, who said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And you were so gifted in our time together to make others feel like they could change the world. And then, I came across this quote from an alumni magazine where you said, when I was a teacher, I came to work with my mind on changing the world. I had these big, lofty goals about what I could do in my classroom. And now, as I've grown into leadership, I understand that I'm just here to serve. And I know a lot less than I thought I knew. I have a lot less power than I thought I had. And I know and recognize that every single decision impacts others. I can remember becoming the superintendent and thinking I was going to have all this authority. And then I realized it really wasn't going to be so easy. And I was going to have to negotiate people's mental models about things and accept that change, like enduring change, happens slowly. In fact, over time, I came to realize that whenever we advocate for change, the system will aggressively work to return to stasis or to status quo. So here's the thing. I bet you could look at your accomplishments in Muskegon Heights, in Okemos, and now in Ypsilanti and point to real and lasting positive changes that you led. But I wonder, would you unpack your quote a little bit? And maybe, how has your thinking developed over time?
Yeah, I was reflecting on that in that alumni magazine and thinking about how I started and then where I was when I had that quote. And I can tell you, as a classroom teacher, we feel like we have so much control in our little worlds where we close the door and just the thoughts about us directly impacting students every day, and how just being able to make decisions about the minds and about what the lessons we were going to teach, and just really having control of that small environment. And then coming to now, being superintendent, 10 years as superintendent, I'm just becoming more and more humble, realizing even more so every day that how much I don't know. I still laugh and chuckle at myself when I think about, oh, I think I have all these solutions, or people come to me thinking I have all the answers and the solutions. Yet I think overall, what I've learned the most is that everybody has a genius. Everybody's a genius, and everybody has this genius skill about them. They have something. And so part of me being humble is pausing enough to find out about each person. It doesn't matter if it's a student, a parent, community member, the cook, custodian, or administrator, whoever it is, finding out what their genius is, what do they bring, that piece about them that makes them the unique individual. And that just really makes me have to, like I said, pause, listen, and be more curious in my leadership. And again, I think I started off with, oh, so much passion. This is about my vision. But really, it's learning about the vision of the people that I'm serving, about my community that I'm serving in, and just pausing.
You know, when we are hired, we have this sense of urgency. And when we get this sense of urgency, it's not by accident. We're hired by a board who tells us about some of the things that they'd like to see different. As we're interviewing and meeting people, they talk about the things that either could benefit from change or a review. And I think you are right that it is important for any one of us. And of course, this podcast is geared towards those who are new in the field, those who are established. Maybe they're changing from one district to another. You've had that experience. And to take that step back and, to your point, pause and reflect, to build relationships with individuals inside and outside the organization. I know when I first became superintendent, I think I spent more time sort of curating or cultivating a relationship with individuals outside when I ought to have been spending more time inside, talking to what you said, getting an idea of what people's genius is, and to understand what their vision is for their community and for their school district. That helps you know sort of how to navigate possible changes.
Absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head with that.
In the leadership model that I've been using to advise others, there's a dimension called leaders learning work. And that is like the mind or the brains of the organization's work. And inside that dimension is a term, supporting resilience. Resilience, the act of meeting setbacks and trauma and getting back up. Leaders are constantly, I think that they're constantly carrying the traumas of others each and every day. And they get back up and they persevere. I looked at one of your former school districts and where you are now. So like Muskegon Heights, free and reduced lunch percentages, all schools were between 80% and 97% free and reduced lunch. So children qualifying for the federal lunch program. And in your current district, Ypsilanti, the free and reduced lunch percentages, 2 schools are 40%, that's just 2 schools. But then in all the other schools, it's between 70 and 90% of the children qualifying for free reduced lunch. Can you talk a little bit about what does resiliency look like in Ypsilanti?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is something that this community knows a lot about. Before I came in 2013, this was Ypsilanti Public Schools and Willow Run Community Schools, and it merged. The district merged in 2013. So with that came a loss of identity. These two competing school districts, rivals, if you may, came together as Ypsilanti Community Schools. So when I came here just a few years after, there was a lot of trauma still, where teachers and administrators had to reapply for their jobs just to work here. And so resiliency has looked like finding a new identity. So if you go on the website, you'll see a lot everywhere about hashtag stronger together. And originally it came from the two districts, Willow Run and Ypsilanti Public Schools, coming together, being stronger together. And when I came, I really hit that and said, this is not just about two districts coming together. This is about all of us are stronger together. So, and it can't be about just the hashtag. It has to be about how we behave, our identity, who we are. So it's me and the students are stronger together. The teachers are stronger together, administrators, the community. And we have truly come together as a district. I think during the pandemic, tested those systems, tested the resilience that we had built up, the momentum we had built. And then even after the pandemic, just this recovery, we actually created something called the Resiliency Center. It's a one-stop shop for parents. We realized that if you needed something from a closed closet and at an early learning center, and you had a child at an elementary and a high school, you had to go to 3 different places if you needed help. Versus now we have a one-stop shop. You can go shopping, you can get food, you can get help with social services agency, mental health help. Go in there and use the computers so that you can apply for a job. We understood the needs even more of our community. We came together even closer, and that's how we got the system of distinction just in November, because it's the community coming together as the identity of seeing ourselves stronger together. That's the other part about resiliency, is that we learned that interdependence, that is all of us growing together, all of us going through the phases together, not just one group or over another.
I imagine that the public schools had a relationship with other entities like nonprofits, United Way.
Yeah, we have
examples of that work.
Yeah, we have over 200 partners here. We're a very small district, but over 200 partners, as well as in the last 2 years, we've received over $30 million in grants. And how did that happen? Again, this Stronger Together mantra. We are only 5 blocks from Eastern Michigan University. And when I came, we didn't have a strong relationship with them, even though they were only 5 blocks away. And today, their methods courses are held inside of one of our elementary schools. So it is.
So they're taking education from just theory, and this is what you might see in a classroom too. We're going to see it in classrooms right now as we work here.
Yes. Yeah. They spend half of their class inside of one of our classrooms. Like they have a classroom here, but then they go out into the classrooms and actually work with our teachers. They have been our science Olympiad coaches. We even work with our newspaper, and our students are journalists, and they send out their articles throughout the year.
I love it.
The partners are truly what has helped us and what continues to help us to serve the families in this community.
I'd like to go back to the Alena that made that quote in the alumni magazine and say, see, you can make enduring change. I think the challenge for superintendents is often, because we are so deeply in it day in and day out, we often forget to take a step back and see how much we've achieved, because there's still so much to do. And you just listed so many partnerships and so many innovative programs that are going on in your buildings because of you and your team being willing and open to opening your doors and welcoming the community in, because it is that Stronger Together mantra, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. Hey, I ask a question of every guest who comes on this podcast, and I'd like to ask you as well. How does the term an imperfect leader resonate with you?
It is truthful. It is honest, and it's real. And I appreciate that. term imperfect leader. I think that oftentimes other folks out there look at leaders and say, oh my goodness, you look so put together, you're speaking so eloquently, you have all of these experiences and this idea or ideal leader. And what I know to be true is that each one of us are imperfect. None of us make all the right decisions at the right time. None of us have it all together at any time. And that, we're just imperfect people working to serve where we are. And so I'm loving that term. And I really hope that others would embrace that term and that thought as well. Because oftentimes, especially brand new leaders, in whatever term they want to call it, feel this need to be perfect. In our organization, at the end of the year, my building administrators and my team and we do a fail fest, and we share the biggest blunders that we've had all year, and we laugh and cry. And they talk about how freeing the experience is when they're in the fail fest. And the first time, everybody was like, "Oh my goodness," trying to almost be perfect. But now we really look forward to it.
We have this responsibility to build this culture that surrounds all of us and really sends a message of what we believe and how we want to be together. And that is an amazing example. An Imperfect Leader, Leadership in After Action is supported by ILAA, a firm dedicated to supporting aspiring new and established leaders. For more information, please find them at human-centeredleaders.com. We're back for segment 2 of An Imperfect Leader called Imperfect Leadership in After Action. My guest is Dr. Alena Zachery-Ross, the superintendent of Ypsilanti Community Schools in Ypsilanti, Michigan. In this segment, we ask our guests to deconstruct a decision they had to make, and then we discuss a little bit. So what happened?
Yeah, my second superintendency, I had been superintendent for 5 years in Muskegon Heights. Things had gone well. I had worked with an elected board, an appointed board, and the RTAB board for the state. So I thought board relations was something that I just had under wraps. And I went to my new district when I got to Okemos Schools and forged forward working with the community, the students, the teachers. And I did not spend as much time building a strong relationship with my Board of Education. I think that was a huge mistake. Now, of course, now in retrospect, because I didn't get to know each individual. I spent time with my board president and the other board members. I did not find out what their vision was, what their goals were, and get an understanding of how comfortable they were with some of the big items that were important for them. And so I really, now knowing better, now looking back on the situation, I would have spent a lot more time getting to know each and every board member.
So first of all, this is as my mentor would say, a juicy topic, because I think that is one of the biggest things for superintendents to learn how to navigate are the relationships between the administration and the Board of Education. I mean, the Board of Education has one employee, the superintendent, and it is not common for us to be taught how to do this work. And it is probably something that ought to be looked at more carefully from all the associations. Every state has a superintendent association. It's really just that board relationship piece, because I think it's what sinks superintendents from time to time. One of the pieces of advice I got when I first became superintendent was to ask each board member for 2 to 4 people in the community that they thought I should talk to, someone that they considered to be a real resource. And I have to say that really worked really well for me to get a better sense of who my board members were based on who they selected that I would talk to. And so if you're a new superintendent out there and you're thinking about how do I cultivate a relationship, that was one piece of advice that I got that really served well. Now, I will tell you, similarly, when I first became a superintendent, I spent some time with my board president, but I didn't do the hard work of meeting regularly with board members to understand what motivated them and what their vision was for the community. And so I basically tolerated them. I mean, I don't know any other way to say it. I would say, I'll see you at the board meeting, I'll see you at the work session, and call me if you have any questions. But otherwise, I didn't understand that relationship. And it seems like that was something that got overlooked in your situation as well.
Certainly, and that there were signs that I, again, now more experience would have said, okay, there are certain signs here where I need to spend more time with certain ones and less time with others that were subtle, yet again, with more experience. And perhaps if I had some guiding questions just to follow up throughout that year that I would have picked up on because of my evaluation, highly effective, all these things. Yeah, I think those weren't the most important things. It's that the nuances of the relationships, their values, what they think is important, who they're listening to, outside. So those 2 to 4 people that they want you to talk to, I think that's a great idea, man. That I wish that someone had given me that advice. That one.
Well, and I'll tell you what really helped me, because my relationship with the board was somewhat non-existent. Those 2 to 4 people in the community were coming back to the board member saying, boy, I really like him. Oh, he's got a real vision for the community. So at least it sustained me. It buoyed me for a bit there, because they didn't know me as well, because I didn't ask, as you pointed out, some really important guiding questions. How do you want to be together? What are your big goals for the community? What do we do well? What were some other guiding questions that you asked?
Well, what concerns them? What kind of keeps them up at night? That was, I think, really telling. And then what were they most proud of? I did do the typical listen and learn tour, but really those personal questions about, what really bothers them, and even the small ones about so why did you choose to serve the community in this way? That has helped me to understand the mindset of what really got them to be on the board.
Right, because you get to ask a question that sort of helps reveal whether or not an individual ran for a particular reason, whether they want to serve the community as a whole, or they have an agenda item that they are determined to accomplish. So that's a really good question. What did you learn about relationships, or what new relationships were formed?
Oh, really looking at, and I really follow this a lot in just my whole way as a learner and a leader, is using the DILTS, nested levels of learning. It really talks about, don't look at the behavior of a person. That's farther end up the chart. First, what is the identity? Who do they see themselves as? So we had certain people on the board that I'm the mother. And as the mother, I'm fighting for my child. Or a different person, their identity was almost they were a lawyer and they wanted the policies and they didn't want to use Neola or any other. They came there to make sure their identity was about making sure things were in order. It wasn't about them, and even them being a parent. That was their role. That was their identity. So DILTS talks about identity first. Then next, people go on their values and beliefs. So really trying to think about, okay, what do people value? Something I did there, again, too early, yet we were having some safety concerns. They didn't have the front doors locked in any building. So because of the threats, that was a big one that we conquered, and did end up locking the front doors, and that was controversial. And certain people, they valued the freedom of walking in and out the buildings. They really valued that. And it meant something for them to have that open campus and being able to just walk in and out of any door instead of having single entry. Well, I didn't know about certain values and beliefs that people held. And so then it goes next to the capabilities and then finally to behaviors. But oftentimes we get our cues from just behaviors. And I learned about that relationship. I got to find out the identity, what drives them, who they are, and what people's values and beliefs are, and not just be distracted by the behavior.
So think about it this way, from like a metaphor standpoint of you see smoke, and so you treat the smoke by opening a window, or you see a fire, you put it out with a fire extinguisher. That's sort of treating actions without first saying, well, why did we even get a fire in here in the first place? As you were describing your interactions with board members and recognizing in terms of relationships that it's not about treating the actions. I mean, you do in that moment, and you seek to understand why those actions are happening. It's about getting deeper into who is this person, how do they see themselves, what are their mental models, what are their beliefs, because those are what inform the way that people behave.
Absolutely.
Wow. What frustrated you?
That the communication it has to be both ways. It can't just be the superintendent. It's not just the superintendent. It's not simply the board. Is where did that breakdown of communication go? We're again on the outside, things look well, great evaluation, great feedback. Where was it with the disconnect where we couldn't have these conversations just as adults, as professionals, as adults, that it led to me needing to resign. That frustrated me. Number one, like the breakdown in communication. And secondly, I was asked to come there to deal with certain topics and some hard rocks that we needed to deal with. And it frustrated me that making some of those hard decisions, the consequences were so large. And that I felt like it was not repairable. And that's frustrating because you can't get the work done. I couldn't finish that work.
I imagine that if anyone is listening, they're going, wait a second, wait. She resigned from that position. So that's an interesting piece. So we're talking about a topic of board relations and the importance of getting to know how people see themselves, their mental models, instead of dealing only with their actions. And the feedback you were getting clearly is meeting expectations, serving the community well. And it got to a point where you decided this isn't working for me, it's not working for them, and you're going to move and find a different position. I think it's important for superintendents, especially aspiring, to understand that happens. And there are other opportunities to be able to demonstrate your own genius. And I wonder, when you look back, clearly there are things that these external forces should have been doing differently. Is there something that you think that you could have done differently?
Oh my goodness. Yes. So many, really, as we were talking in the first half, like really taking more time to pause and reflect. I think I was just on such to go, to do well, to quote unquote, prove that I was going to do well in this new environment.
Well, and you were recruited to this community to take on a serious issue. And I imagine, based on what I've read about you and the areas for which you have great skill, is tackling issues of inequities within a school district. Right?
Absolutely.
And so you're brought in, you're recruited, there's a sense of urgency. So there's a good reason why you're moving quickly. There's also a really important piece about that stepping back, reflecting, seeing where we are. How do we make meaningful change?
Yeah, yes, reflecting. And then also, I think the second part, so personally pausing and reflecting. And the second part is always, and I'm going to use always, because oftentimes we can't say always important to have someone close by, somebody close by that you can really listen to, talk to, that can give good feedback. And so I don't think I had that relationship with anybody in that district. And that was a big mistake on my part.
That's really interesting. The job is so lonely and it's isolating, and you have an incredible team that you want to rely on, and yet you can't. I mean, there's, to some degree, you have to stay separate from those you are working closest with, and finding that mentor or that sounding board, that individual that doesn't judge but challenges, right, is honest with you. That is such an important piece. And so for anyone who is in leadership, if you don't have that mentor who's going to be honest with you and be there for you, I would highly encourage you, go find that person, because otherwise you're doing this work alone, and that is incredibly hard. That makes the job even harder.
Yes.
What, in the end, would you say was something good that came out of this whole situation?
Oh my goodness. The work that I went to go do, the work with the equity plan, I was able to work with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, and we wrote a template for the whole state based off of that 1 year that I was in that district. And so the work is impacting the whole state of Michigan at this point. And so I'm so grateful.
What advice would you give to an aspiring leader?
You know, I talk a lot about identity, really knowing who they are. They have to know who they are as a person. What are they willing to lay on the railroad tracks for? What are they willing to say, no, I'm going to resign for? You know, knowing those boundaries, knowing who they are. And then what are they going to lay on that railroad track for?
I've had conversations with superintendents who have talked about they have believed that they needed to make compromises in order to make progress, and it got to a certain point where they didn't recognize themselves anymore. So I think that's really important advice. My guest again today was Dr. Alena Zachery-Ross. Alena, thank you so much for sharing your energy, your enthusiasm, your intelligence, your compassion, and your passion for helping others become the best that they can. Or what is it? #together, right?
Yeah, stronger together.
Stronger together. I have really missed talking to you, and I'm so honored I got to do that today.
Well, thanks again for having me.
Music for An Imperfect Leader was written and arranged by Ian Varley. Sam Falbo created the Daruma doll butterfly artwork. Imperfect leadership is not a scarlet letter. It is a badge of honor. It recognizes that serving as a lead learner is about being a vulnerable leader, an empathetic leader, a compassionate leader. And I'm proud to be an imperfect leader, so I hope you'll join me next time for another episode of An Imperfect Leader, Leadership in After Action.